Do you know that one of the most remarkable stories of resistance in African history involves a strong woman who stood against the British Empire to protect her people's heritage? Today we are going to dive into how Nana Yaa Asantewaa, the brave Queen Mother of Ejisu, led her people in a fierce battle to defend the Golden Stool, the sacred symbol of the Asante nation's unity. We will explore the war strategies she used, including clever tactics to deceive and outmaneuver the British soldiers. We'll also uncover how one of her commanders, driven by greed for wealth instead of focusing on the mission, contributed to her downfall. His actions allowed the British governor to escape, leading to a tragic loss for Yaa Asantewaa and the Asante people. Despite their courage and determination, many Asantes died in the struggle to protect their cherished Golden Stool. Tragically, after her capture, Nana Yaa Asantewaa was humiliated, stripped naked, and sent into exile on the Seychelles Islands. The British, recognizing her formidable spirit, spoke of her in the royal palace as a persona non grata, acknowledging her as a significant threat to their colonial rule. Despite her exile, she remained a symbol of resistance and pride for the Asante people. Keep watching Black Stories Untold as we bring you the full details of this incredible story. Subscribe to our channel to learn more about the powerful and inspiring tales from African history that deserve to be remembered and celebrated. In 1900, the British tried to humiliate the Asante Kingdom again. The colonial governor, Sir Frederick M. Hodgson, demanded that the Asante nation hand over their Golden Stool, which was their most important religious and national symbol. However, the Asante people anticipated this demand and created a fake stool to give to the British. This provocation led to an uprising among the Asante. The legendary woman, Nana Yaa Asantewaa, led an attack on the British fort in Kumasi. The British government had previously deported Nana Prempeh I to weaken the Asante Kingdom. Instead, this action made the Asante people stronger because they realized that if they weren't careful, the British would take away the Golden Stool, which held the soul of the nation and symbolized their unity. The Asante people secretly organized themselves to protect the stool. This showed the British government that the Golden Stool itself was more important than its occupant. Therefore, the new governor, Sir Frederick M. Hodgson, decided that to break the Asante Confederation, he had to get the Golden Stool. The governor therefore came to Kumasi and called a meeting of all the chiefs. On 28 March 1900, a grand durbar was organized for Governor Frederick M. Hodgson in front of the Kumasi Fort, which later became Yaa Asantewaa Fort and now Ghana Armed Forces Museum. When the chiefs were going to welcome him, one of the men called Kofi Fofi penetrated through the people who were carrying the chief of Juaben and told the chief of Juaben that if the governor did not tell them something meaningful, they would fight. The chiefs present at the Durbar included the Mamponghine, Bekwaihine, Kokofuhine, Juabenhine, Adansihine, Agonahine, Nkwantahine, Kumawuhine, and of course Nana Yaa Asantewaa, who was the queen and acting chief of Ejisu. Others present were Nana Afrifa, Nana Adu Jamfi, Nana Fofi, and Nana Antoa Mensa. They later formed the war committee of Nana Yaa Asantewaa. After the salutation, the governor got up and made the following statements. 1. Neither Nana Prempeh I nor Barima Yaa Achireboana would ever return to Kumasi. Asante would be ruled by the government's resident representative. 2. The government had the right to call people to do communal labor in the form of road construction and building of government houses. 3. The people had to help in the smooth administration of the states and ensure that peace prevailed. 4. They were to pay interest on the indemnity of 50,000 ounces of gold in the Formidable Treaty. He had shared the money among the states in the following order: Kumasi State, 125 ounces of gold; Mampong, Adansi, Bekwai, Nkoranza, and Manso Nkwanta, 150 ounces of gold each; Nsuta, Kokofu, and Agona, 110 ounces of gold each; Jaman, 100 ounces; Juaben, Tachiman, Bechiem, Nkwanta, Wam, and Bompata, 75 ounces of gold each; Ofinso, Ejisu, Kumawu, Wanchi, Abodom, Ahafo, and Obogu, 35 ounces of gold each; Agogo, 20 ounces of gold. 1 ounce of gold was equal to 8 pounds, 2 shillings sterling. Finally, he stated that the Asante nation had shown a disrespectful attitude towards him. He was not happy with the chair he was given to sit on. It meant relegation of authority. He was the representative of the Queen of England, and Queen Victoria was the supreme power of the nation. The governor, therefore, demanded that the golden stool should be brought for him to sit on it. If the nation gave the golden stool to Nana Prempe the first to sit on, why didn't they bring it to him to sit on? He therefore demanded it as a right. He continued that, though the government had not received the golden stool yet, he would rule the nation with all the power and strictness at his disposal. After the governor, Sir Frederick M. Hodgson, made his request, all the chiefs were sitting down and could not utter a word. His statement was greeted with a moment of silence, followed by murmuring and giggling. He therefore gave a chance to anybody who had a question to ask. According to oral tradition, it was here that Nana Yaa Asantewaa, Queen Mother of Ejisu, who was acting as the chief of Ejisu following the deportation of Nana Kofi Afrane I, after waiting a little for the men to speak, and seeing that nobody was prepared to ask a question, stood up to ask questions. She first asked whether the governor saw Nana Prempe or when he was coming to Kumasi. The governor, Sir Frederick M. Hodgson, replied that Nana Prempe I had been deported to Seychelles Island. She then told the governor that it was the custom of the Asantes that whoever occupied a stool was in charge of it, and was the person who knew where it was kept. For that reason, if the governor was anxious to get the golden stool, he was to bring Nana Prempe I back to show him where the golden stool was being kept. The governor again replied to her that Nana Prempe would not be returning. Nana Yaa Asantewaa's last statement for the English interpreter to translate to the governor was, "Tomorrow, ghost widows will get husbands." This was a declaration of war. Nana Yaa Asantewaa then turned to the silent Asante Kingdom chiefs and men and addressed them as follows. How can a proud and brave people like the Asantes sit back and look on while the white man takes away your king and chiefs and humiliates you with the demand for the golden stool? The golden stool only means money to the white man, and that is why they have searched and dug everywhere for it. I shall not pay even 1 ounce of gold, 8 pounds 2 shillings, to the governor. If you chiefs are going to behave like cowards who are too frightened to fight, then exchange your loincloths with my undergarments. Literally meaning, it was interesting to note that coincidentally, Nana Yaa Asantewaa was among the very few women at this particular gathering. There was silence, and then the people began to break off. It will be recalled that Nana Yaa Asantewaa's only brother, who was the chief of Ejisu, was among the chiefs who had already been sent with Nana Ajeman Prempe I to Seychelles Island. After addressing the Asante chiefs, Nana Yaa Asantewaa walked to the governor and sarcastically admired his uniform. She then insisted on going up to the platform to shake hands with Mrs. Mary Hodgson, the wife of the governor. In the process, she soiled and spoiled the white gloves of the governor's wife with the spit of chewed cola nut she had stored in her palm for that purpose. Thereafter, she turned to the governor and spoke to him in the native Asante language, using the following words. "Foolish white man, who are you to demand the golden stool? The golden stool is for the king of Asante and not for people like you. Do you belong to the royal family of Asante? Where is our king? Go and bring him, and I will personally show you where the golden stool is. He is the only custodian of the stool. Foolish white man, go away and leave us alone." According to oral tradition, they did not know why, but the governor did not show any sign of anger at Yaa Asantewaa at all. Whether the interpreter translated everything accurately to the governor or not, the governor's reaction to all the insults was to send soldiers to Barekisi, a suburb of Kumasi, to search for the golden stool. It is interesting to note that there was an Asante citizen called Kwame Tua, who had previously collected money from the British and had promised to show them where the golden stool was. He was a person no one could take seriously. According to Claridge, before the governor and his men left Accra for Kumasi, he had a young man called Kwame Tua who told him that he knew where the golden stool was being kept and that the custodians of the stool were tired of keeping watch over it day and night. He needed some gift from the governor to induce them to give it up to him. The informant, Kwame Tua, also dressed in military uniform to disguise his identity. That was why the governor stated in his speech that he would by all means get the golden stool. Immediately after the meeting ended, he detailed some soldiers to leave the Kumasi Fort with the informant in the night to go and start the search for the golden stool early the following day at Barekisi. The Asante people were aware of the governor's intentions and were prepared to protect their sacred heritage. Yaa Asantewaa, along with her war committee, continued to mobilize the Asante warriors for the impending conflict. The search for the golden stool became a symbol of the broader struggle between the Asante people and the British colonial forces. As the British soldiers and their informant moved towards Barekisi, the Asante warriors set up ambushes and defenses along the way. The Asante people, deeply committed to preserving their cultural symbol, were ready to face the British troops. The tension between the two forces grew as the search for the golden stool intensified. According to Ofinso tradition, when the news of the search party was heard, the British met strong resistance by the combined forces of the people of Bari, the Queen of Ofinso, Yaa Asantewaa, and her men, Agogo and Achwima, who laid ambush at Bari and Nkwanta after the search party had searched in vain and were returning. Yaa Asantewaa ordered her men to open fire on them. There was fierce fighting along the bank of River Orin, claiming some casualties. When the citizens of Bari, neighboring suburbs, heard the first gunshot at Bari, they started saying, "There have been some gunshots at Bari." With these gunshots at Bari, the Yaa Asantewaa War was declared. After the meeting, Asanaba Yaa Asantewaa started mobilizing forces to form formidable troops against the British in the inevitable war to protect the golden stool. Some of the chiefs decided that they would not give in to the demand. If the demand was repeated, they would fight to defend the golden stool. They remembered the way their king, Nana Prempe I, was taken away from them. They bowed in shame for not firing a gun in his defense, so they would not repeat the same mistake. States that took this decision were Kumasi, Ejisu, Ofinso, Achwima, Ahafo, Kokofu, Bechem, Nkwanta, and Adansi. Outspoken among the agitation for war was Yaa Asantewaa, the Queen Mother of Ejisu. However, she had serious problems bringing the entire Asante forces together for two reasons. A. After arresting most of the paramount and important chiefs of the Asante nation, some of the stools in the state were occupied by the governor's nominees, while others were still vacant. With that, it was very difficult to reach the masses to gather for war. Nana Yaa Asantewaa travelled extensively within a very short period of time in order to be able to convince all the citizens of the Golden Stool to come together and defend the stool that represented the unity of the Asantemen. B. The civil war that erupted during the contest for the Asantehene between Nana Ajiman Prempeh I and Nana Yaa Asantewaa. Some people were suspicious with regard to the primary aim of Nana Yaa Asantewaa, especially the supporters of Nana Yaa Asantewaa. They could not dismiss the idea that Nana Yaa Asantewaa was so eager to fight the British only because she wanted to bring back Nana Prempeh I and have him installed as the Asantehene. It is interesting to note that Asantes normally would do everything to protect the Golden Stool, but not necessarily the occupants at all times. There were other chiefs who did not subscribe to the war. They held the view that Asante states were not united as they were at first. There were some states which had opted for British rule. Looking at their military might too, they were not strong enough to meet the British army at that particular time. Their war leaders too were arrested and deported with Nana Prempeh I. Therefore, they preferred friendship with the British so that they could tell the governor that they could not part with the Golden Stool. They were of the view that if they fought and the Golden Stool was captured, they would lose it forever. The chiefs who subscribed to these views were the chiefs of Mampong, Nsuta, Juaben, and Agona. They were therefore in the fort when the Yaa Asantewaa War was declared, and they fought on the side of the British. With the exception of Agona, where there was a division of allegiance, and some of the men fought alongside the troops of Yaa Asantewaa, the subjects of the other three states did not take part in the war. The chiefs of Bompata, Kumawu, Atebubu, Jaman, Nkoranza, and Bekwai decided not to raise arms against the government, so their subjects too did not take part in the war. The chiefs of Tachiman, Wanchi, Berekum, Wam, Manso Nkwanta, and their subjects also stayed out of the war. Eventually Nana Yaa Asantewaa was able to mobilize forces together, and on 30th March 1900, at her palace at Ejisu, a war council was formed. Those who belonged to this war council were Nana Kofi Fofi, chief of Kase Sun; Nana Kwame Jansa, native of Bantama; Nana Kwame Afrifa, chief of Achwima; Nana Kwako Anjwi, Akwamuheni, and captain of the Ofinso contingent; Nana Kwame Adum Asamoah, the famous chief executioner; Nana Osei Kwajo Krome, Mo; Nana Osei Kwajo Krome, son of a Bantamahene; Nana Anchwi Ajay, chief of Nkawie; Nana Kwabina Nkwantabisa, chief of Odumasi and leader of Adansi; Nana Antoa Mensa of Antoa; Nana Kofi Adu, chief of Burumfu; Nana Kwakunsia, chief of Asante Akropong; Nana Yaa Asantewaa as the commander-in-chief. It will be recalled that it was at this meeting that Nana Yaa Asantewaa made the most convincing speech of her life. She addressed the members of the Asante War Committee as follows: "Brave men of Asante, we are now faced with a serious confrontation by the governor's extremely provocative demand for the Golden Stool. We should remember that the Golden Stool is not only our spiritual backbone, but also the religious symbol of the unity of Asantemen. Not quite long ago, the white man came and unilaterally occupied our God-given land, and by force of arms declared the Asante Kingdom as a British colony. We should also not forget that during the time of Nana Kofi Kakari, the aggressors waged a senseless war on us, destroyed the seat of the Asante monarchy, and burnt our palace after looting all the treasures bequeathed to us by our forebearers. Taking our brave men for a ride, the governor arbitrarily arrested and deported our king with some paramount chiefs without you men raising even a finger. Are you not ashamed of yourselves? Today he has come to demand the golden stool. I am asking you all here, shall we sit down as cowards and let these rogues take away our pride? We should rise up and defend our heritage, because it is better to perish than to look on sheepishly while the white man, whose sole business in our country is to steal, kill, and destroy, shamelessly demands our sacred stool. Arise, arise, men of Osei Tutu and Opoku Tenten, because I am prepared to lead you to war against the white men. I am urging all the women here to go home and stay behind, because we, the men, are ready for war. Should any one of you be afraid to fight, may he be punished for his shameful act by the great Asante god Odomankoma. Interestingly, Yaa Asantewaa was the only woman at this meeting. The War Council, under the leadership of Yaa Asantewaa, supported by the chiefs and people of Ofinso, Abofuor, Bechiem, Nkwanta, Achwima, Ejisu, and Kokofu, declared full-scale war on the British with an initial force of 20,000 armed men. Others who also fought on the side of the Asante army included Kumasi, Duayao Nkwanta, Tachimantia, Adansi, and Kuntanase. The following states decidedly stayed neutral because the chiefs did not want to fight the British: Bompata, Kumawu, Atebubu, Jaman, Nkoranza, and Bekwai. The following also were not engaged in the war because they had previously entered into peace terms with the British: Tachiman, Wanchi, Berakum, Wam, and Manso Nkwanta. Chiefs like Mamponghene, Nsutahene, and Agonahene, who were appointed by the British, even fought on the side of the British. The Juabenhene Nana Otuo Serebur I decided to remain neutral, and even at one time during the war made an effort to negotiate a ceasefire between the Asante forces and the British troops. According to Claridge, the governor got a hint of the preparation for war by Kumasi, Ejisu, and Ofinso states. So he sent some Hausa soldiers to warn them to desist from causing trouble. The soldiers he sent never returned. It was later learned that they had been killed. That also meant a declaration of war. The siege of Kumasi began with a march from Ejisu and ended at the fort on 8th April 1900. Yaa Asantewaa might have been in her 60s when this war started. She ordered the incessant bombardment of pro-British elements in the capital, Kumasi, and this compelled the British and other aliens to seek refuge in the fort. The war started on 25th of April 1900 and continued through to October 1900. After the British forces had run out of ammunition and logistics, life became very unbearable for them at the fort, because Yaa Asantewaa ordered that the death drum should be played every day for several hours. This psychological trick worked because there were a lot of Asantes at the fort too, and they translated the meaning of the drums to the British. Those Asantes who were not prepared to fight were afraid and intimidated, so they all sought refuge at the fort. People in the fort numbered over 779. The number was made up of 29 whites and 750 soldiers and their wives. The most prominent among them was the Dwabenhene, Nana Otuo Serebur I, and his elders. Because the British had no food and ammunition, the constant booming of the death drum was like death to them. According to Lady Hodgson, at a certain point in time at the fort, she wished she was dead because she could not bear the sound and the interpretation of the death drum. According to Dr. J.B. Dankwa, one of the effective strategies used by Yaa Asantewaa was to stretch the British soldiers and their allies from Nigeria to starvation. She cut off the food supplies to the fort, And when the European officers and their soldiers found out that their wives and children were starving to death, they were demoralized and became very desperate. This strategy proved very effective because Nana Yaa Asantewaa established blockades at every point that led to Kumasi and appointed various war generals to take care of them. This was very effective because it did not only slow down the advance of the British soldiers, but also cost them manpower. According to oral tradition, the British soldiers were so hungry that some of them even ate rats. The slow movement also led to an increase in the death and suffering of the people in the fort. The blockades were some 6 to 7 feet high and 4 feet in thickness, built of gigantic forest trees. The interstices were filled up with swish and twigs and brambles and bound together with telegraphic wires. It had wings that extended into the bush on either side and were therefore hidden from sight. This technology was said to have been the idea of the Army General Antoa Mensa of Antoa. He commanded the rearguard regiment, which was expeditiously dispatched to reinforce the existing forces at the various stockades. He was in the forefront during the siege of Kumasi City and finally the fort. Antoa Mensa was in charge of a large contingent consisting of 1,500 men stationed in Kumasi City to beat back any attempt by the British to rescue the besieged men and women in the fort. Another tactic used by Nana Yaa Asantewaa was the war of deception. The Asantes used pieces of plantain trees tied to a rope to divert the attention of the British army. It happened that during the siege at the fort, the British soldiers peeped through the sniper spot at the fort and shot at the Asante soldiers who were fighting from outside the fort. The trick with the trees was therefore an antidote to that. They cut plantain trees into pieces about 1.69 meters long, tied them to a rope, and threw them on top of the thicket around the fort. They would lie down and pull the ropes so that the pieces of plantain trapped in the thicket would cause some movements, which the British mistook for human beings. The British subsequently wasted their ammunition, and this compelled the governor to request reinforcement and ammunition. It was at this time that the governor realized the danger. He sent a Save Our Souls SOS message to the coast, requesting food, medicine, and of course, reinforcements. In his message, he said they would be able to hold out at the most until Wednesday, June 20th, 1900. You must arrive here latest by that date. If this message reaches you, reply immediately informing me where you are and when you can arrive. You will, however, have to overcome at least 2 blockades. A fierce battle was therefore fought. Due to better ammunition, the soldiers loyal to the government inflicted heavy casualties on the Asante soldiers, but because of their numbers, this did not deter them, and they continued to fight. The reasons for the war, as given by Nana Yaa Asantewaa and her soldiers, were that Governor Maxwell deceived the Asante nation by asking them to mount a durbar for him, not knowing that he was coming to arrest their king. That the new governor was also trying to take away the golden stool, which contained the soul of the Asante nation, from them. That the search for the golden stool at Bari had taught them that if they did not take up arms, the precious legacy of theirs would be lost forever. These were the reasons which made them decide to die for the golden stool and the Asante nation. In the governor's camp, apart from casualties from actual fighting, famine and disease claimed many lives. The governor therefore called his men and decided on a ceasefire with Nana Yaa Asantewaa. He called his loyal chiefs and asked them to go to the camp of the Asantes and discuss the issue with them. The Asante army, led by Nana Yaa Asantewaa, replied that they would agree to the request provided the governor would meet the following demands. That their king, Nana Prempe I, should be brought back. That the governor should permit them to buy and sell slaves. that no Asante citizen should be compelled to do any labor by serving as a carrier, that they should not be forced to break stones for building government houses, that the government should ask all strangers engaged in buying and selling on Asante soil to stop and leave trading to the Asantes only, that all the foreigners, including the governor's representative, should leave Kumasi right away. According to Claridge, after hearing the complaints, the governor responded that he couldn't agree to their demands because Nana Prempeh had been deported and wouldn't be allowed to return. The British government had banned the slave trade, so he couldn't allow them to trade in slaves. When his soldiers were fighting, he had to use Asante citizens as carriers. Stopping non-Asantes from trading on Asante land was not possible because the land was a British colony, and everyone under British rule had the right to trade there. The governor did say that forced labor could be stopped, since the governor refused to meet Nana Yaa Asantewa's conditions. The Asante soldiers tightened the blockade, making conditions for the British soldiers even worse. The ceasefire didn't happen, and the fighting continued. After days of heavy fighting, the Asante forces decided to stop firing and let the governor and his men starve. With many dying from disease and hunger, in June 1900, the governor and his men decided to find a way out. They planned an escape for the governor and the civilians in the fort. After another attempt at a ceasefire failed, the governor and his soldiers planned to escape. The Asantes learned about this and changed their plans. Nana Yaa Asantewaa then ordered that if they managed to escape, General Antoa Mensah should chase them and bring the governor back, dead or alive. According to oral tradition, Nana Yaa Asantewaa made this declaration while riding on her horse, with her face smeared with black and white clay, her rifle in her right hand, and a knife in her left hand. She went through the streets of Kumasi giving orders and made sure they were followed exactly. She then went to the Kumasi Fort and shouted, "Where are they? Fools! Why did you come to our land? You want our golden stool? It's in my gun, so come and get it." She was so angry that she made the first bold attempt to capture the Kumasi Fort herself. Their efforts were fruitless because Captain Marshall, who had about 250 Asantes with him, fought them back, costing Nana Yaa Asantewaa and her troops about 200 men. These men were later buried in a mass grave behind the court building, just opposite the present Yaa Asantewaa Fort in Kumasi. After this experience, Nana Yaa Asantewaa decided to avoid direct confrontation with the British because their soldiers had superior weapons, making direct combat dangerous. Meanwhile, the governor and most of their soldiers, as well as their wives and children, were still kept as prisoners in the fort, and life became very bad for them. Fortunately for them, on 11th May 1900, the neutral Asante chiefs, who were also in the fort, managed to negotiate a ceasefire for some days, and the British were able to bring in some food and medicine. However, it was forbidden for them to bring in more weapons. This did not work out because on 15th May 1900, Major Morris managed to fight his way to Kumasi through the Kintampo and Karanza blockade, which was under the command of Nana Kwajo Antwi of Ofinso. Meanwhile, the Save Our Soul SOS message sent by the governor was heeded, and the British sent a relief column through Bekwai. Since Bekwai was fighting on the side of the British, it was easy for them to come as near as Trede, a village near Kumasi. The British engaged the Asantes in direct combat and were so overwhelming that the Asantes lost many of their soldiers. Trede was eventually burnt, and some of the Asante soldiers were taken as prisoners. Lieutenant Colin Wilkinson was much more successful than his colleagues, because he was used to bush fighting from his experience in India. Some of the Asante soldiers even fled their blockades, leaving behind their ammunition and even their wounded colleagues. Victory was in sight as the British started gaining control over the Asante army. With this, the governor decided to leave Kumasi and escape. On the next day, the governor, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Ramsayer, the head of the mission in Asante, and most of the aliens in the fort left through Patasi, heading towards Denchira and Cape Coast. General Antoa Mensah and his men went after them and were charged to bring the governor dead or alive. The general and his men got so close to the British and fought the rear guard fiercely. When things got tough, some of the British decided to drop their loads and money to be able to catch up with the main British troops. General Antoa Mensah and his troops made a big mistake. Instead of continuing to chase the British soldiers, they stopped to pick up the loads that contained money and ornaments, thinking they would gain more from the spoils. By the time they realized their mistake, the governor and his people were already gone. This allowed the governor and his men to escape safely. At the peak of the war, when the governor and his men planned to escape from the fort, he sent a message to England for troop reinforcement. 1,400 trained troops were called from the West African colonies to help. The troops reached Kumasi 17 days after the governor's escape. With their superior weapons and large amounts of ammunition, they were able to defeat Nana Yaa Asantewaa and her forces after 3 months of fighting. The soldiers left behind to defend the fort during the governor's escape included 3 white officers, 1 African officer, 129 Hausa soldiers, and 25 carriers. Apart from these, those involved in the escape were the remaining whites, 600 Hausa troops, 800 African natives made up of native soldiers and loyal chiefs, and 1,000 civilians seeking protection. Some of the civilians also died on their march to the coast. Meanwhile, the governor had given up on getting the golden stool because they often had to search in 5 different places at a time, and none of the information they had was reliable. According to Ivor Ajamandua, the following people took care of the golden stool at different times. Nana Abamo brought it from Bari to hide it at Wawase, and later it was taken by Nana Obuabasa Opoku Mensah to Abu Abuja. There were other secret hideouts for the golden stool that have been kept hidden for all these years. The Pinanko Bretuo family of Wawase are well known for keeping the golden stool safe for many years, and the Asante people owe them a lot of gratitude. It should be remembered that one of the main reasons why the Yaa Asantewaa war started was the governor's intention to take the golden stool to London. Although the Asantes were losing the war at this stage, the British could not take the golden stool away. As the British attacks intensified, confusion and disorder spread through the Asante lines. Throughout the war, the Asantes had not faced such mysterious and fierce assaults. Many Asante soldiers surrendered to British rule, while others ran away. Victory was near as the British troops gained control over the Asante army. The gate of the fort was opened, and Captain Bishop, Mr. Rolfe, and Dr. Hay came out, followed by the rest. The commander, Colonel Wilcox, then entered the fort with his men as planned. The African soldiers in the British army rushed into the streets of Kumasi and inflicted severe atrocities on the fleeing Asante soldiers, leading to the fall of Kumasi. The Asante nation was humiliated, and Nana Yaa Asantewaa reverted from her manhood to her womanhood. Although she had moments of control during the war, she eventually lost and needed a place to hide. According to oral tradition, in the last days of November 1900, Nana Yaa Asantewaa left Ejisu for Kumasi to begin a long journey by road to Sreso-Timpum, a small village about 85 kilometers from Kumasi, near the Mponwa-Ahafo border. She initially went to Mahame, in the Ofinso traditional area where her aunt, Nana Afranewa, was the Ofinso Hemar, but had to leave because the British soldiers were looking for her. According to Sreso Timpo Muhene, Nana Yaa Asantewaa came with a 10-year-old girl who served as her servant. Before reaching Sreso, she stopped at Kunso, but the people were scared to keep her there since the British were searching for her with more than 1,000 men. She then proceeded to Impasaso, where the people advised her to go further to Sreso, since the chief there was from the Asona family, and might do all they could to protect her. Nana Yaa Chewa and Nana Ajapoma hosted her in their house at Sreso, and the descendants of this family still have some gifts that Nana Yaa Asantewaa left with them. A few days later, Nana Yaa Asantewaa was betrayed by Kwame Tua and finally arrested by the British soldiers. Meanwhile, most of the ringleaders of the war had already been captured by the British police and sent into custody. Despite the Queen of England's victory in the war, she considered Nana Yaa Asantewaa a persona non grata, and the only solution was to exile her to a distant country to ensure the security of the colonialists. According to Osei Kwaju, on 17th May 1901, Queen Victoria of England ordered the deportation of Nana Yaa Asantewaa and 13 Asante chiefs to the Seychelles Islands to join Nana Prempe I. They were transported on the ship Dwarka on 25th May 1901 and were made political prisoners on the Seychelles Islands. They likely arrived in the Seychelles by the latter part of 1901. When they arrived, Nana Yaa Asantewaa was settled on an estate of about 27 acres, 2.5 miles from Victoria. She and all the other chiefs received monthly stipends or allowances from the Gold Coast government. Nana Yaa Asantewaa even had servants whom she paid monthly salaries from her allowances. She became a converted Christian and took lessons to learn the English alphabet. She died on the Seychelles Islands on 17th of October 1921 due to a chronic toothache and was buried there. May her soul rest in peace. 31 other chiefs who helped in the Yaa Asantewaa War were imprisoned in Elmina Castle, while Kwabena Chere, the chief of Bantama, was hanged for war crimes. According to oral tradition, some stools in the Asante nation became vacant due to the arrest of their occupants, the deportation, and the imprisonment of chiefs who supported Nana Yaa Asantewaa in the war. The government, on the advice of loyal chiefs, appointed people who fought on its side during the Yaa Asantewaa War to fill these vacant stools, regardless of whether they were royals. In some cases, even strangers were appointed to these positions. Bantama, Ofinso, Ejisu, Ankaase, and Atipin stools were occupied by government appointees. Two main factors caused the defeat of Yaa Asantewaa and her troops. The first was disunity. The Asante nation became divided, with half of the people refusing to fight against the British. Of the remaining half, some fought for the British, while the rest fought with Yaa Asantewaa. According to oral tradition, the chiefs loyal to the British revealed Asante warfare strategies, contributing to Nana Yaa Asantewaa's defeat. Another factor was the love for money and wealth. During the governor's escape, General Antoa Mensah was given 1,500 troops to chase him and, if possible, prevent his escape from Asante land. He was supposed to bring the governor's head back to Kumasi. According to Claridge, General Antoa Mensah was more interested in capturing refugees and their loads than pursuing the governor. He thought the Asante people would prefer riches and slaves over the governor's head, so he stopped chasing him. When this action was reported, General Antoa Mensah was demoted. Oral tradition says that during the chase, the governor's men learned that many of Nana Yaa Asantewaa's men loved money more than their mission. When the going got tough, the British threw money around, and the soldiers stopped to collect it. This allowed the governor and his men to escape. This war cannot be classified solely as a war between the Asante and the British, because it was also a civil war between two factions of Asante, with one faction being helped by the British. It did not involve the entire Asante nation. Although the Asante troops were eventually conquered by the British, the Asante claimed victory because their main goal was to protect the Golden Stool, which they succeeded in doing. May Nana Yaa Asantewaa's soul rest in peace. The Asante people have written many songs in Nana Yaa Asantewaa's name, and she is honored in praise poetry. Her fame and reputation grew immensely after her deportation to the Seychelles Islands and her death there. The Asante man remembers her for her fierce fight against the British to protect the Golden Stool. The Kumasi Fort was the place where the Nana Yaa Asantewaa War was fought. It was later converted into Yaa Asantewaa Fort and now serves as the Ghana Armed Forces Museum. The Kumasi Fort and Ghana Armed Forces Museum is one of the few military museums in Africa. It is located in the Wadara Barracks in Kumasi, the capital city of the Ashanti region of Ghana. The Manshea Museum, Kumasi Cultural Center, Kumasi Zoo, and Kumasi Central Market are all within walking distance of the Kumasi Fort. The Kumasi Fort was built in 1820 as an Asante fort by the Asantehene Nana Opoku Wari I, to resemble the coastal forts built by European merchants. The Kumasi Fort had to be rebuilt in 1897 after its destruction by the British forces in the Anglo-Ashanti War of 1874. The Asante Fort was constructed from granite and brown soil brought from Cape Coast to Kumasi by head porters to make it similar to the castle in Cape Coast. It is located near the present-day Adam Central Post Office and Opoku Trading Supermarket. In March 1900, during the Asante Rebellion, the Kumasi Fort was besieged and encircled, and 29 British soldiers were trapped inside for several weeks. The leader of this rebellion was the Queen Mother of Ejisu, Nana Yaa Asantewaa. After a brief period of imprisonment and starvation in the fort, she was forced into exile in the Seychelles, where she died. From 1952 to 1953, after the Second World War, the armed forces of the British colonial government took over the Kumasi Fort and converted it into a museum. The museum was founded in 1952. Exhibits include military equipment, artifacts and other objects used in the British Asante War of 1900 and during the Second World War. The collection includes weapons of war, colors, medals, armored cars, anti-aircraft guns, photographs, and portraits. This serves as a valuable historical institution for tracing the evolution and development of the Gold Coast Regiment of the colonial era to the present-day Ghana Armed Forces. There is a British military cemetery about 200 meters northwest of the Kumasi Fort, which contains graves of British casualties from the Nana Yaa Asantewaa War. The Kumasi Fort and Armed Forces Military Museum is open daily from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., except on Sundays and public holidays. The museum is easy to spot in the city centre, with tanks lined up outside the entrance. A tour of the museum can last about 2.5 hours. The museum is quite large, with many different rooms, including prison cells and a secret money storage room. The museum is built into the Kumasi Fort, making it not just a museum, but also a historical site. It focuses largely on the British Asante Wars, many of which were won by the Asantes. The museum houses various weapons used in those wars, old medals and badges, and many photos from that time. There was also a fight between the Ghanaians and the Japanese in Burma, and the old Japanese weapons and devices confiscated during that conflict are kept in the museum. Nana Yaa Asantewaa, a brave and fearless woman, stood against the British Empire and fought fiercely to protect the Golden Stool, the sacred symbol of the Asante nation's unity and heritage. Her courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds have made her a legendary figure in Ghanaian history. She mobilized her people, led them into battle, and resisted the British with remarkable tenacity, ensuring that the Golden Stool remained safe from foreign hands. Nana Yaa Asantewaa, a brave and fearless woman, stood against the mighty British Empire and fought fiercely to protect the Golden Stool, the sacred symbol of the Asante nation's unity and heritage. Her unwavering spirit and dedication to her people's freedom continue to inspire generations. To learn more about such incredible stories and the rich history of Africa, please be sure to subscribe to Black Stories Untold and share where you're watching from.
Oh Queen, Queen, Yaa Asantewaa. Oh Queen, Queen, Yaa Asantewaa. Oh Baba, so far from me. Oh Queen, Queen, Yaa Asantewaa. Oh Baba, so far from me. Oh Queen, Queen, Yaa Asantewaa. Oh Baba, so far from me. Oh Queen, Queen, Yaa Asantewaa. Oh Baba, so far from me. Pia, Asante, your mind.